and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT Top 5 Countdown video. Today our analysts will be listing the top 5 compositions for patch 10.13. The meta has evolved to the point where there's a ton of variations of compositions depending on what traits you play. That means that a lot of builds we'll go over today aren't a fixed constant and should be played more flexibly than just finding the same 8 champions each game. With that said, let's dive on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video, and at the top of our list, we've got the number 5 composition to talk about, Mystic, or rather, multiple variations that use Mystic as the base trait. So as we mentioned, a lot of today's builds aren't just specifically 8 champions you play every game. Mystics, for example, has a few core champions you'll likely play every game, but has multiple variations you can play depending on the situation. What determines when you should go a certain variation over another is really up to the items you have, what champions the game gives you, and honestly, just adapting to the rest of your lobby. Specifically for Mystic, the 2 most common you're likely to see are 4 Vanguard for Mystic and 4 Mystic for Protector. The Vanguard build can also be tweaked so that you're playing 6 Vanguard and only 2 Mystics. There are, of course, more ways you can play, but as far as 4 Mystic goes, the first 2 listed are the most common. At the heart of each of these builds, you have one constant: Cassiopeia. She's generally the primary carry for any Mystic-focused build. She does require specific items to do well, those being Blue Buff, Morellonomicon, and preferably Rapid Fire Cannon as your last item. Your second carry depends on which variation you play. In Vanguard Mystic, the typical 8 champions you'll run are Cassiopeia, Karma, Soraka, Lulu, Jace, Wukong, Nautilus, and Mordekaiser. Jace is your secondary carry for this build, with defensive items being strong on him, or you can give him a bit of damage with a Death Cap or Ionic Spark. The variation is the most well-known version of Mystics, but it did fall off later in 10.12 and hasn't been as good in 10.13, but is definitely still viable. For Mystic Protector, the standard 8 are usually Cassiopeia, Karma, Soraka, and Lulu for Mystic, with Xin Zhao, Rakan, Nico, and Urgot for Protector. Urgot is your secondary carry in this build, with Shojin, Guardian Angel, and Rapid Fire Cannon being best for him. Xin Zhao can be an okay item holder as well, with Warmogs and Bramble Vest making him incredibly hard to kill. Let's move on to the number 4 composition, Mech. With the removal of Kaisa and the Demolitionist charge item, it seemed that Mech was doomed to fail with the mid-season update, but it has proven to be a resilient trait and is actually in a healthier place than it used to be, as it has more than one variation that's viable. Before we dive into the various variations, let's talk shop about the Super Mech and Mech pilots. First, what items should we look for? Generally, defensive items are best, such as Bramble Vest, and dodge items like Trap Claw and Quicksilver. There's room for more damage-focused items, whether magic or physical, but if you're looking for the safest option, go defensive. The second thing to talk about is should you slow roll. That was the primary way to play Mech prior to the mid-season update, but so far it hasn't been necessary to roll for 3-star Mech pilots. It's generally better to level to 8 and 9 to get additional champions and traits more so than chasing 3-star units. Now, we can get back into the thick of it by going over a few of the common variations. At the top are 6 Sorcerers with Mech. It's a powerful build because a Super Mech can deal a ton of damage with its ability while also providing a stable frontline. Make sure you try to grab a Quicksilver for it, as a Zephyr can lose you the game. For the Sorcerers, you either want Victor or Xerath as your carry and fill out the rest with any Sorcerers, though Syndra, Ahri, and Zoe are the most common. Victor needs some type of mana item like Shojin or Tyr, as he takes a while to get enough mana to cast, and Xerath does well with any AP items. A variation of this build drops 2 Sorcerers and adds in Riven with another Infiltrator like Echo. Riven can be your secondary carry, with Deathcap, Guardian Angel, and Quicksilver being top items. The other Mech build that we want to cover is a twist of the classic Mech Infiltrator from yesteryear. Shaco, Zed, or Echo will end up being the carry for this variation. For additional champions, you can run either Ziggs or Gangplank, as they're great for Demolitionists, and Victor with Nocturne provides Sorcerer and Battlecast. We did say slow rolling wasn't common anymore, but you can do it with this variation on level 7, looking to hit Rumble 3 and Shaco 3, but it isn't necessary, as leveling is generally a better option. Next up, we have Sorcerers as the number 3 composition. Sorcerers have so many variations to choose from, so it's kind of like a pick your own adventure style of game when you do play them. We already went over one of them with the Mech variation, so let's focus instead on the other common Sorcerer build, Riven Sorcerer. It may seem odd having Riven as your primary carry in a Sorcerer build considering she's Chrono and Blade Master, but as they say, the devil is in the details. Those details, of course, are her ultimate. Because of the way her ability works, she gets shields every time she casts, and those shields scale with ability power. This makes her a natural companion to sorcerers, specifically 6 sorcerers in this build's case. Alongside Riven, you've got the usual suspect for 6 sorcerers. Victor and Xerath do well as the backline carries, and you'll want Twisted Fate since he provides Chrono. Besides those 3, you can round out the rest of the build with Star Guardians like Ahri, Syndra, and Zoe. That is one of the good things about this variation is that you can have it online by level 7, which means you can stabilize by rolling a lot earlier than other builds. At level 8, you have many different options, though Janna is great as you can take out 1 Star Guardian and add in an Annie for an additional frontliner. Plus, she provides attack speed for your Riven and CC, so she's a great fit for this build. Items can vary for Riven, but generally she wants a Guardian Angel and Quicksilver since she's often your frontline. Deathcap is generally the 3rd item since it provides a ton of extra ability power, though Ionic Spark is an okay alternative. Your other carries, Victor or Xerath, can use a mix of items, whether it's a mana item for Victor or a Rage Blade for Xerath. Moving on down the list, we've got Cybernetics coming in at number 2. Cybernetics, or specifically 6 Cybernetics, has really proven itself to be a top build after the mid-season update. The addition of Vayne and the rework of Echo have really stabilized this build for the better. Vayne is one of the best carries in the game for multiple reasons. 1, she's hard to deal with. Not just because Cybernetics give a health buff, but also the way her ability works. Whenever she tumbles, she becomes temporarily untargetable, which can stop abilities from going off and shift an attacker's focus to a different target. This makes her incredibly safe. Another reason why she's so strong is, well, she does a ton of damage. Between giving her items, both the sniper and cybernetic trait, and her ultimate, she can output so much damage to her target. Slap a Last Whisper and Infinity Edge on her, and she's basically going to 1v9. Okay, let's stop gushing over Vayne for a moment and talk about the other champions. Obviously, 6 Cybernetics means you want 6 of them, and those are generally Vayne, Echo, Aurelia, Leona, Vi, and either Fiora or Lucian, though Fiora is the most common for Blade Master. At level 8, you'll want Thresh for Chrono and Mana Reaver, and the last champion can be almost anything. The second Infiltrator, another Blade Master like Riven, or a Sniper for Vayne. Overall, Cybernetics are so good because of how easy it is to get them online since it no longer requires Echo to hit 6 Cybernetics. Plus, Vayne provides a stable carry with Echo being a late game beast. It's a great build, but also is highly contested, so always scout to see if it's worth going or not. And now we can talk about the number 1 composition in 1013, Jinx. Okay, so Jinx isn't exactly what you'd call a composition, but the gist of it is using Jinx as the main carry and building a composition around her. She's one of the best 4-cost carries in the game despite getting nerfed this patch. There's quite a few builds you can throw her in, but before we talk about those, let's talk about items. Jinx is unique and the items you want on her can be quite open-ended. You don't have to focus hard on a specific item or items for her to do well. Plus, she doesn't always need defensive items, though that can depend on the build that you play. For damage items, you've got the standard duo of Last Whisper and Infinity Edge, but outside of those two, you can play any of Deathblade, Runins, Giant Slayer, or Red Buff. Defensive items, again, aren't always necessary, but it's best to grab a Guardian Angel or a Trap Claw if you need one. Quicksilver is useful against all the CC in the game, but it does have a downside in that Echo will target down your Jinx during his ultimate, making it a risky item to make. Okay, now we can talk about the different builds. The 2 most common are 6 Rebels and 4 Brawlers, with a lesser played build being Mech Jinx. Today, we'll focus on the first 2, starting with 6 Rebels. Rebels depends entirely upon whether or not you get a Guardian Angel and a Gangplank. If you can secure that, then 6 Rebels is playable. The core champions will be Jinx, Aurelion Sol, Malphite, Gangplank, Ziggs, and Ezreal, with the other 2 Rebels being whatever ones you want, though Zed and Yasuo are the most common. Look to fast 8 on 4-3 when aiming for this variation, as you want to find Aurelion Sol and Gangplank quickly. Brawlers are much easier to run as it doesn't require legendaries to stabilize. The core champions are Jinx, Malphite, Gnar, Vi, Blitzcrank, and Ezreal. To fill in the rest of your composition depends on what you're finding. Ideally, you want Aurelion Sol as the 3rd Rebel, in which case you'd run either a 4th Rebel to protect Jinx or another frontline champion like Wukong. Before you find Aurelion, or in the case that you never do, you can run Zed with a 2nd Infiltrator instead. Whichever champions you do play, you can either fast 8 with this build or roll on level 7 to stabilize. Rolling is not bad considering most of your core champions are 3 and 4 cost. That's our top 5 compositions for 1013. Keep in mind that the meta is always evolving, so these builds are likely to change over the course of the patch. Before we go today, we do have a couple of builds that we want to talk about as our honorable mentions. Up first, we have Astro Sniper. Astro Sniper seemed like a fantastic composition in 1012, but it fell off quickly once players realized how fragile Jhin and Teemo actually are. Unlike Vayne, neither of them have inherent defensive qualities, so they're often open to being killed by infiltrators or spells. That said, it's still a build that can squeeze into the top 4 when you hit it, so it's still a viable option if you do choose to play it. The core champions are Teemo, Jhin, Gnar, Nautilus, and Wukong. From there, you can go 4 snipers by adding in Ashe and Caitlyn, and Lulu at 8 for Celestial. Or you can drop 2 snipers and instead add in Thresh and Karma. Teemo needs blue buff as his core item and any magic damage item after that. Jhin works best with Last Whisper and Infinity Edge so he can tear through the enemy frontline. The second honorable mention today is Slash Bros. It's still viable despite receiving a few nerfs, but it is quite volatile. The reason for that is that you want to slow roll on level 7 to find Master Yi 3, and well, it's not always going to happen. If you hit it early enough, you can stabilize in top 3, otherwise you can easily find yourself lower than 3rd. The core champions are Master Yi, Yasuo, Riven, Irelia, Shen, and Xayah for your 6th Blade Master, with Zed providing Rebel and Fizz or Echo as a second infiltrator. Master Yi is your main carry and uses items like Rapid Fire Cannon, Rage Blade, Quicksilver, or Death Cap. One last thing to note is that you can make Zed a Blade Master if you find the Spatula, which means you can slot in an additional champion at 8, like Lulu for Celestial or Thresh for Mana Reaver. That is all for today, folks. The meta is diverse, though there's definitely a few builds much stronger than others, like Jinx or Cybernetics. Let us know in the comments section below if there's any build that you think should be on the list that we missed. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.